Ravi Sharma, Anika Patel, Samir Mehta, Priya Kapoor, and Arjun Desai thought Las Vegas was their escape, their dream, their chance at a new life. But when a $67,000 jackpot turned their fortune upside down, jealousy, obsession, and betrayal ignited a deadly chain of events that none of them could escape. Please subscribe for daily new update of crime story and watch till end. Ravi Sharma and Anika Patel had always dreamed of a life that felt bigger than the one they led. Living in a modest apartment in Los Angeles, they worked long hours at their respective jobs. Ravi as a software engineer and Anika as a marketing associate. But money was always tight. Bills, rent, and daily expenses often left them wondering if their dreams of travel and adventure would ever come true. Yet they never gave up hope. Every month, they would set aside a little money, carefully budgeting so they could afford their annual trip to Las Vegas, a place that had fascinated them since they first saw it in movies. For them, the Strip wasn't just bright lights and casinos. It was the embodiment of freedom, excitement, and a taste of something extraordinary. By 2023, after years of saving and sacrificing small luxuries, they finally had enough for a week-long getaway. From the moment they arrived, the energy of the city enveloped them. Neon signs stretched endlessly across the streets, and the sound of slot machines echoed through every casino. Ravi and Anika moved from hotel to hotel, soaking in the luxury, from towering suites with sweeping views to extravagant buffets that seemed endless. Yet beneath their smiles, there was a shared nervous excitement, a feeling that something monumental might happen, even if they didn't know exactly what. On their third night, after a long day of exploring the casinos and attractions, they decided to try their luck one last time. It was a small slot machine tucked into a quieter corner of a bustling casino, one that many visitors overlooked. Ravi hesitated for a moment, checking the machine and wondering if the odds were truly in their favor. Anika, with her characteristic optimism, encouraged him to go ahead. They placed their wager, each coin spinning on the reels with a soft clinking sound that seemed almost magical, and then it happened. The reels aligned perfectly, lights flashed, alarms rang, confetti-like graphics lit the screen, and the jackpot total appeared in bold. Ravi and Anika froze, staring at the numbers as the reality slowly sank in. The amount was staggering, far more than either had ever imagined holding in their hands. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. They hugged, laughed, and cried at the same time, unable to contain the mix of disbelief and exhilaration. It wasn't just the money, it was the sense that life could suddenly change, that all the years of hard work and dreaming had led to this singular, dazzling moment. They spent the rest of the night in a euphoric haze. Champagne flowed, expensive dinners followed, and they indulged in luxuries they had once only seen from afar. They even documented every moment, posting photos and videos online, sharing their triumph with friends and strangers alike. Little did they know, that very celebration, that public declaration of sudden wealth, would set the stage for a series of events that would test their love, their trust, and ultimately, their survival. The city that had seemed magical now held the shadow of danger, and the dream they had chased so fervently was about to take a dark and unexpected turn. The morning after their incredible win, Ravi and Anika woke up in their hotel suite with a mixture of disbelief and elation. The $65,000 jackpot wasn't just a number on a screen anymore. It was real money, tangible, and life-changing. Ravi ran his fingers over the chips and receipts, almost as if touching them could make the fortune more believable. Anika, on the other hand, sat by the window, staring out at the dazzling lights of the Strip, imagining how their lives could change forever. The city that had always been a playground for other people suddenly felt like it had opened its doors to them. That day, they walked through casinos with a new perspective. The sounds of slot machines no longer felt like background noise. They felt like an invitation. Every roulette wheel, every card table seemed infused with opportunity. Ravi was cautious, analyzing the options carefully, but Anika was unstoppable. She wanted to celebrate, to feel the rush of freedom that the jackpot had brought. Together, they allowed themselves to indulge in a few small luxuries. A designer handbag for Anika, a high-end watch for Ravi. Each purchase felt like a statement. They were no longer constrained by the limits of their modest past. As night fell, they returned to the casino, where their lives had changed forever. The slot machine that had made them rich now seemed like a shrine. People were still spinning the reels around them, unaware that a life-altering moment had occurred there just hours before. Ravi and Anika watched the lights flicker and listened to the bells ring, feeling a strange mix of nostalgia and anticipation. The jackpot had given them money, yes, but it also gave them something intangible, a sense of invincibility, as if the world could not touch them. But with fortune comes attention. As news of their win spread online, friends and acquaintances reached out almost immediately. Some messages were full of genuine excitement and congratulations, but others carried a subtle edge of expectation and desire. People began asking for favors, loans and advice on investments. Some extended invitations that seemed innocent at first, but quickly carried an unspoken pressure. Ravi, who had always been analytical and cautious, felt the first stirrings of anxiety. Anika, more optimistic and trusting, tried to shield him from worry, but even she could not ignore the sudden shift in how people treated them. The couple's nights were filled with celebrations, but shadows began to creep in. A wealthy lifestyle, once a distant dream, now required decisions neither of them had ever been trained to make. They debated over purchases and investments, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in tense arguments. The money that had once promised freedom now felt heavy, carrying an invisible weight. The thrill of the jackpot was undeniable, but it was becoming clear that it had also opened a door to new pressures, temptations, and unknown dangers. Amid the glamour and glitter, Ravi and Anika felt a strange unease. The city's bright lights seemed to mock them, reflecting both the joy of their victory and the uncertainty of what came next. That night, as they lay awake in their suite, the jackpot's glow still lingering in their minds, they could not have imagined how quickly fortune and love would collide, setting them on a path neither could escape. What had started as a dream of wealth and freedom was quietly, dangerously, beginning to unravel. Returning to Los Angeles, Ravi and Anika tried to settle back into their normal lives, but nothing felt the same. Their modest apartment now seemed almost laughably small compared to the dreams they had been living in Las Vegas. The $65,000 jackpot had followed them home, but with it came a new reality that neither of them had fully anticipated. The excitement of winning had faded slightly, replaced by a gnawing sense of responsibility and tension that seemed to grow with every passing day. At first, the couple tried to enjoy their newfound wealth. They shopped for furniture, upgraded their cars, and even took a few spontaneous trips. Friends who had barely noticed them before suddenly appeared with interest that felt calculated rather than genuine. Every invitation, every request for advice or money, seemed to carry a hidden expectation. Ravi began to notice the subtle changes in people around them, smiles that felt forced, conversations that skirted around the jackpot, and sudden expressions of envy. Anika, meanwhile, focused on security, installing alarms, cameras, and even hiring a part-time driver to avoid unnecessary attention. The contrast between Ravi's growing caution and Anika's meticulous vigilance created a quiet friction between them. Arguments began to surface over things that had never mattered before. Ravi, who had always been frugal and careful, wanted to invest the money wisely, seeking long-term stability. Anika, however, wanted to enjoy the present, to feel the thrill of what they had won. Each disagreement, no matter how small, now carried the weight of fear, jealousy, or mistrust. Friends noticed the tension and whispered behind their backs, but the couple tried to maintain a facade of happiness. Their social media posts were filled with smiles and celebrations, but behind the camera suspicion and anxiety grew steadily. Money also brought them closer to people who claimed to be experts, but were anything but. Financial advisors, investment brokers, and even strangers with opportunities began entering their lives. Ravi wanted to research and consider every option carefully, but Anika sometimes acted impulsively, making purchases or transferring funds without telling him. These small decisions, while seemingly harmless, began to erode the foundation of trust that had once held their relationship together. Each secret, each unexplained transaction, planted a tiny seed of doubt that grew faster than either of them realized. The stress seeped into their daily routines. Sleep became restless, conversations tense, and laughter rare. Even the thought of the jackpot, once a symbol of freedom and excitement, now carried a subtle sense of danger. Ravi felt trapped by the weight of responsibility, while Anika felt isolated, wondering if her partner still trusted her. Slowly, a rift formed, a silent barrier between them that neither could cross, fueled by fear, desire, and the relentless pressure of sudden wealth. As the days passed, the couple began to realize that winning the jackpot was not the end of their journey, but the beginning of a new, darker chapter. The glitter of Las Vegas had faded, leaving behind uncertainty and tension. The very fortune that had promised freedom now threatened to destroy the life and love they had built together. The cracks in paradise were widening, and neither Ravi nor Anika could see how deep they would grow, or how soon those cracks would lead to consequences. Neither could have imagined. Weeks after returning from Las Vegas, Ravi and Anika's life began to feel less like a dream and more like a delicate balancing act. The initial thrill of their jackpot had faded, replaced by an undercurrent of tension neither of them could ignore. Both were keeping secrets, small at first, but significant enough to erode the trust they once shared. Ravi spent hours with a financial advisor who promised high returns through risky investments. Every meeting left him exhilarated, yet anxious, caught between the allure of multiplying their wealth and the fear of losing it all. He told Anika only the broad strokes, careful to hide his growing obsession with the schemes. Anika, meanwhile, found her own escape in the tangible pleasures the jackpot allowed. She purchased luxury clothing, jewelry and designer accessories, sometimes secretly charging items to accounts Ravi didn't monitor closely. To her, these purchases were harmless indulgences, a way to celebrate their hard-earned fortune. But as the weeks passed, she began to notice subtle changes in Ravi. His distant expression, the way he avoided her questions about money, the increasing secrecy surrounding his phone and meetings. Each small omission built a wall between them, though neither could admit the depth of their growing mistrust. Their social life changed dramatically, as well. Friends and acquaintances, once casual and friendly, now viewed them through the lens of wealth. Invitations to dinner, parties and gatherings multiplied, but with each came subtle pressures, questions about their finances, hints of loans or favors, and veiled suggestions to invest with others. The couple tried to maintain appearances, smiling and laughing in public, but privately the stress was palpable. Nights that once ended in intimacy now concluded with silence or tension, the weight of suspicion and unspoken resentments pressing down on both of them. Despite their different approaches, Ravi and Anika were both aware that the jackpot had altered their world permanently. Every decision seemed to carry more weight than before. The thrill of sudden wealth was tempered by the fear that a wrong move could unravel everything. Ravi's risk-taking investments began to feel like a gamble not just with money but with their lives. And Anika's secret indulgences made her wonder whether she could trust the man she had loved for years. The very fortune meant to bring happiness now carried the seeds of conflict. Even small disagreements became magnified. An argument over an unnecessary purchase could spiral into days of coldness. Suspicion and jealousy crept into every conversation, and every unexplained expense or delayed message triggered anxiety. They were living in parallel worlds within the same apartment. Ravi calculating and planning, Anika observing and questioning, both unable to bridge the gap. The more they tried to assert control, the further they drifted apart. As the weeks passed, the couple realized that the jackpot had done more than make them rich. It had exposed vulnerabilities they never knew existed. Love, trust, and security were no longer constants in their lives, but fragile constructs threatened by greed, temptation, and secrecy. What had started as a dream of freedom and excitement was transforming into a tense, precarious reality. Each decision, Each secret, each small act of deception was a step deeper into a world neither Ravi nor Anika could escape. The cracks in their relationship were widening, and soon, those cracks would lead to consequences neither could have imagined. Consequences that would change everything. As the weeks passed, Ravi and Anika's world became increasingly isolated, though the outside world seemed more present than ever. One evening, Ravi attended a networking event for tech professionals, a gathering meant to be casual but which turned into something far more sinister. There he met a stranger, an older man with a polished appearance and an air of confidence. The man spoke with authority about investments, opportunities, and ways to multiply wealth quickly. His words were seductive, promising exponential growth with minimal effort. Ravi, already restless from the pressure of managing their jackpot, found himself drawn to the stranger's confidence. He felt a mix of excitement and unease, knowing that some of these schemes were risky, yet unable to resist the thought of turning 60. Meanwhile, Anika began noticing subtle, unsettling signs around their home. Unfamiliar phone numbers appeared on their caller ID. Small, unexplained withdrawals showed up in their bank accounts. And sometimes Ravi would disappear for hours without a clear explanation. She tried to confront him, but each conversation ended with vague reassurances or deflections. Her intuition screamed that something was wrong, that the world outside their apartment was creeping in with hidden dangers. Anxiety settled into her bones, and she began sleeping with the lights on, checking locks multiple times a night and obsessively monitoring their finances. The stranger's influence over Ravi grew steadily. He met him privately, discussed investment plans in hushed tones, and even began considering illegal shortcuts that promised higher returns. Ravi rationalized it as protecting their fortune, convincing himself that the risk was worth it. Yet each meeting seemed to pull him further away from Anika, further from the simple life they had once known, and further into a dangerous world he didn't fully understand. Anika, on her part, began to sense the widening gap between them. Trust, once the foundation of their relationship, was now fragile and brittle. Small disagreements over money or daily routines ignited long, tense arguments. She started documenting their finances and conversations, not because she wanted to betray Ravi, but because fear had begun to dominate her every thought. Every missing hour, every unexplained call, and every unexplained transfer of money made her feel as though their once solid life was unraveling, thread by thread. Social media, which had once been a source of joy, became another layer of pressure. Friends who had congratulated them now commented on posts with thinly veiled suggestions or questions, further stoking anxiety and distrust. The couple felt trapped in a bubble of wealth, constantly monitored, constantly judged, and constantly tempted by forces they could not control. By the end of the month, the tension had reached a breaking point. Ravi's obsession with the stranger's schemes and Anika's growing paranoia created a dangerous environment. They were no longer partners in joy, but co-inhabitants of a fragile world dominated by fear, secrecy, and suspicion. Each passing day seemed to tighten the invisible noose around their relationship, setting the stage for conflicts that neither could predict, but both could feel simmering beneath the surface. The jackpot, once a symbol of dreams realized, had transformed into a magnet for danger, drawing them inexorably toward a path from which there might be no return. The tension between Ravi and Anika had reached a breaking point. Weeks of secrecy, anxiety, and constant pressure had turned their once loving relationship into a fragile battlefield. Every conversation seemed to carry an undertone of suspicion, every glance a silent accusation. Ravi felt cornered, trapped between his desire to protect and grow their fortune and the crushing weight of Anika's growing mistrust. Anika, meanwhile, could feel the widening gap between them, sensing that the man she had trusted implicitly was becoming someone she barely recognized. One night, after a particularly intense argument about money and trust, the unthinkable began to form in Ravi's mind. He convinced himself that Anika's doubts and her constant questioning threatened not just their relationship but the fortune that had suddenly changed their lives. His thoughts became increasingly irrational, fueled by sleepless nights and obsessive conversations with the stranger who had first introduced him to dangerous financial schemes. In his mind, eliminating the problem, Anika seemed like the only way to secure the wealth he had won. Ravi began planning in secret. Every detail, every step, was calculated to ensure there would be no witnesses, no evidence, no interruptions. He moved cautiously, knowing that one wrong move could ruin everything. The psychological pressure of his own thoughts was immense, yet he convinced himself that his plan was rational, necessary, and unavoidable. He told himself he was acting out of love, that protecting the jackpot was more important than anything else, but beneath that justification lurked fear, greed, and an obsession that had begun to consume him entirely. Anika, unaware of the full extent of Ravi's intentions, sensed only the growing distance and hostility. She noticed the late-night whispers, the secretive phone calls, and the intensity in his eyes whenever money or the stranger was mentioned. Fear began to creep in, though she could not pinpoint its cause. Her anxiety, combined with the isolation the couple now lived under, created a tense atmosphere that seemed ready to explode at any moment. Friends and family, who had once offered support, were now kept at a distance, leaving Anika increasingly alone and vulnerable. As days passed, Ravi refined his plan, mapping out every possible scenario. He observed Anika's routines, noting when she was most vulnerable, and when no one else was around. The jackpot, once a symbol of joy and triumph, had now become a trap, a source of obsession that dictated every choice he made. He could no longer see Anika as a partner or as the woman he once loved. She had become an obstacle, and his growing paranoia convinced him that drastic action was necessary. The night of the act arrived quietly, almost indistinguishably from any other. The couple's home, once a place of laughter and shared dreams, had transformed into a stage for tragedy. The atmosphere was heavy with tension, every creak and shadow magnified by fear. Ravi's mind was a storm of calculation, anticipation and dread. Anika, still unaware of the true danger, went about her evening routines, her trust in him slowly eroding but not yet extinguished. In the silent moments before disaster struck, the couple existed in a fragile, dangerous equilibrium, a moment suspended between love and betrayal, hope and catastrophe, life and death. The morning after the fatal night, the Sharma home was eerily quiet. Neighbors began to notice unusual signs, lights left on, doors slightly ajar, and an unsettling stillness that did not belong to the normally bustling apartment building. Concerned, one neighbor called the authorities after noticing Ravi's car parked but no movement inside for hours. When police arrived, they were met with a scene that would haunt them long after the initial discovery. Inside, the home was disturbingly calm, almost as if nothing had happened. But in the bedroom, Anika lay lifeless, a chilling reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded. Evidence suggested foul play, and the investigators quickly realized that this was no accident. Details emerged slowly: a few misplaced objects, subtle signs of struggle, and messages on phones and computers that hinted at tension and conflict. Each clue painted a picture of a relationship poisoned by money, secrecy, and paranoia. The news of the murder spread like wildfire. Media outlets, drawn to the shocking story of a couple whose lives had been transformed by a Las Vegas jackpot, began reporting every detail. Headlines focused on the staggering amount won, the seemingly perfect life that had unraveled, and the chilling nature of Anika's death. Friends and acquaintances expressed disbelief, unable to reconcile the happy, glamorous couple they had seen on social media with the tragedy that had occurred. Social media posts, once filled with celebration and joy, were now examined for signs that something had gone terribly wrong. Authorities quickly realized that Ravi's absence was suspicious. He was missing from the home, leaving behind financial documents, personal belongings, and messages that suggested careful planning and premeditation. Investigators pieced together a timeline of his movements, tracking calls, surveillance footage, and online interactions. The stranger who had influenced Ravi financially also became a person of interest, though the web of interactions was complicated and murky. Every discovery added layers of intrigue and danger, revealing a story far more complex than a simple domestic dispute or momentary lapse in judgment. As the investigation unfolded, a portrait of the couple emerged that was starkly different from the one the public had known. Anika's life, once vibrant and full of hope, was revealed to have been filled with fear in her final days. Ravi, whose outward charm and analytical mind had masked his obsession, was now seen as someone capable of extreme measures. The police, piecing together financial records, messages, and witness accounts, uncovered the depth of planning involved in the murder. It was not a crime of passion in the spontaneous sense, it was deliberate, calculated, and terrifying in its precision. The arrest of Ravi came swiftly after a tense manhunt. Found in a nearby town, he confessed under interrogation, his demeanor a mix of calm rationalization and visible stress. The confession revealed the chilling thought process that had led to Anika's death, the intersection of fear, greed, and obsession that had clouded judgment and destroyed love. For the investigators, friends, and family, it was a devastating confirmation of what they had feared. The jackpot that had promised freedom and happiness had ultimately brought tragedy. The Sharma case became a grim reminder that sudden wealth could magnify the darkest human impulses, turning dreams into nightmares and love into a fatal risk.